Have you ever looked back on your childhood and wondered how a meal could tell the story of an entire era? The 1990s were a time of big hair, grunge music, and yes, even a specific kind of food that marked a certain way of living. Back then, eating these dishes wasn't about gourmet cuisine or fine dining. Instead, it was about making do with what you had, stretching every dollar and finding comfort in meals that were humble, sometimes downright bizarre, but always memorable. This video is not just a list of foods, it's a journey back to an era where every meal had a story. So, buckle up and get ready to dive into the culinary past. Slumgullion, also called poor man's stew. Slumgullion is really just what I would call improv work at its best. It's something that's arguably been around since the 1800s, but it only reared its head around the 90s in a way that made it a kitchen staple for many working-class families. In those days when every dollar counted, Slumgullion was the go-to stew made from whatever was left in the pantry. Picture a large pot on a battered stove, canned tomatoes, a few noodles, some chopped up vegetables, and a mystery protein thrown in for good measure. There wasn't a recipe that you followed to the letter, each cook improvised, turning leftovers into a hearty meal that fed the whole family. It was a dish that celebrated resourcefulness. The beauty of Slumgullion was in its unpredictability. One night it might taste tangy with a burst of tomato, and the next it would be a bit bland, reminding everyone that sometimes survival meant accepting whatever came your way. In a sense, every bowl of Slumgullion was a reminder that even in tough times, you could create something satisfying with just a few ingredients and a lot of heart. Salisbury steak. Salisbury steak in the 90s wasn't the polished dish you'd see on a restaurant menu, it was the budget-friendly version that many families learned to love. Imagine a homemade patty made from ground meat mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, and a few secret spices that gave it a hint of something special. These patties were often pan-fried in a splash of oil and then simmered in a thick, savory gravy made from bouillon cubes and a dash of ketchup. While it might have looked a far cry from the gourmet steaks served in upscale eateries, it was hearty, filling, and comforting. For many, eating Salisbury steak was a weekly ritual, a signal that the week's hardships were met with a meal that brought everyone together around the dinner table. It was more than just food, it was a slice of life in the 90s, where every bite reminded you of perseverance and the small victories that came from stretching a meal until it felt like a feast. Cabbage and noodles. Cabbage and noodles might seem like a simple, almost plain dish, but in the 1990s it was a testament to making the most out of modest ingredients. The dish was built around the humble cabbage, chopped into bite-sized pieces, and mixed with noodles that were usually on sale at the local grocery store. A bit of butter, salt, and pepper transformed these everyday items into a filling meal that could be served again and again during hard times. Families found that this dish, while unpretentious, had a way of bringing comfort when the world outside was uncertain. There was a certain magic in boiling down a few basic ingredients and watching them meld into something warm and satisfying. Every forkful of cabbage and noodles carried the weight of many memories, shared dinners, whispered conversations about better days ahead, and a quiet determination to make every meal count. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest recipes were the ones that bonded people together. Tornados Rossini. Now, if you're picturing a fancy plate of beef topped with foie gras and truffle sauce, think again. In the 90s poor household kitchen, Tornados Rossini was reimagined on a tight budget. Instead of expensive cuts of meat, families would use the most affordable ground beef and a few scraps of what could pass as luxury. It was an exercise in irony, a nod to a dish that was all about opulence, now turned into a creative challenge. The dish was prepared by molding the beef into a steak-like shape, searing it in a hot pan, and then smothering it in a makeshift sauce that mixed ketchup with a splash of Worcestershire sauce. The result was surprisingly satisfying, a dish that managed to mimic the richness of its high-end namesake while staying well within a modest budget. Eating Tornados Rossini in the 90s was a reminder that sometimes you had to dream big even when your wallet said otherwise, and that culinary ingenuity could transform even the simplest ingredients into something memorable. Pasta with mayo and peas. Pasta with mayo and peas is one of those dishes that might raise an eyebrow if mentioned today, but back in the 90s it was a creative way to combine pantry staples into a filling meal. It started with overcooked pasta tossed with a generous dollop of mayonnaise and a handful of canned peas. It might sound like an odd pairing, but for many kids coming home from school, it was a welcome break from the same old lunches. The creamy texture of the mayo combined with the soft, slightly sweet peas and the neutral base of pasta created a dish that was both comforting and strangely addictive. In households where money was tight, this meal was a symbol of resourcefulness, a way to stretch a few ingredients into something that could keep hunger at bay until the next paycheck. It was simple, it was quick, and it carried with it a certain charm that only those who grew up in that era could fully appreciate. Spam musubi. Spam musubi is a dish that many of us remember with a mix of nostalgia and amusement. Originally a snack from the Pacific Islands, it found its way into the kitchens of the 1990s as an affordable, no-fuss meal. The basic idea was to take slices of spam, fry them until crisp, and then place them on top of a block of rice, all bound together with a strip of seaweed. For many families, spam musubi was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of making do with what was available. The saltiness of the spam, the simplicity of the rice, and the umami kick from the seaweed combined to create a dish that was as innovative as it was budget-friendly. In a time when every cent mattered, this snack became a lunchtime staple, a quick fix that was both portable and satisfying. It was a dish that reminded everyone that even when ingredients were limited, creativity could turn them into something worth savoring. Chitlins. Chitlins, pork intestines that have long been a part of soul food and rural cuisine, carried a reputation in the 90s that was as much about the experience as it was about the food. Often prepared on special occasions or during times when families were scrimping to create a celebratory meal on a shoestring budget, chitlins were both revered and reviled. The process of cleaning, boiling, and seasoning them was a ritual passed down through generations. To those who grew up with them, chitlins symbolized hard work, tradition, and the resourcefulness of making the most of every part of an animal. Despite their strong aroma and acquired taste, chitlins were a dish that brought families together, sparking conversation, laughter, and sometimes even a bit of friendly debate over who could handle the bold flavors. In the 1990s, serving chitlins was like handing down a secret recipe, one that was as much about cultural heritage as it was about surviving tough economic times. Fish sticks. Fish sticks were the unsung heroes of many a 1990s freezer. Affordable, convenient, and surprisingly tasty, when paired with a side of mashed potatoes or a drizzle of tartar sauce, they became a fixture in many households. These battered frozen sticks were a quick fix for busy families who didn't have the time or money for fresh seafood. The process was simple: coat, fry, and serve. Fish sticks reminded everyone that sometimes convenience was key. They weren't the culinary pinnacle of the decade, but they filled bellies and satisfied hunger in a way that was both practical and comforting. There was a certain nostalgia in the crunch of a fish stick, the sound that signaled that dinner was ready, even if it wasn't a gourmet affair. For those growing up in the 90s, fish sticks were a part of the culinary landscape, representing the ingenuity of turning simple ingredients into a meal that, while far from fancy, was always just right. Duck à l'orange. Duck à l'orange might sound like a dish reserved for fine dining, but in the 90s it took on a life of its own in many budget kitchens. Rather than purchasing expensive duck and crafting a complex citrusy sauce, many families opted for a clever workaround. They'd use the cheapest cuts available and substitute fresh oranges with canned juice, mixing in a bit of sugar and vinegar to replicate the classic flavor profile. This version of duck à l'orange wasn't as refined as its French counterpart, but it carried a certain rebellious spirit. A nod to the idea that you could still enjoy a dish with a fancy name even if you were pinching pennies. It became a sort of culinary inside joke, a way to pretend that you had a taste for the finer things in life, even when reality dictated otherwise. In every bite, there was a blend of humor, resourcefulness, and the bittersweet reality of making the best out of less than ideal ingredients. Hot dog hash. Hot dog hash was a staple for many families who needed a filling meal fast. The recipe was as straightforward as it could get. Chop up hot dogs, mix them with diced potatoes and onions, and fry everything together until it was golden and crispy. This dish was the ultimate expression of 1990s frugality, transforming a simple hot dog into a hearty breakfast or dinner that could feed a family on a tight budget. The sizzle of the pan, the aroma of sizzling onions, and the familiarity of the ingredients made hot dog hash a comforting reminder that even the most basic items in the fridge could be turned into something special. It was a dish that relied on minimal ingredients and maximum creativity, perfect for those mornings when you needed a quick, satisfying meal before heading off to school or work. Hot dog hash wasn't just food. It was a snapshot of an era where every meal was a small act of defiance against hardship. Potted meat. Potted meat, a spreadable, canned meat product, was a common sight in many 1990s pantries. It might not sound appealing to those used to fresh cuts of meat, but back then it was a reliable way to add a protein punch to sandwiches, crackers, or even as a quick snack on its own. Often eaten during lunch breaks or as a late-night treat after a long day, potted meat symbolized the idea that you didn't need luxury ingredients to create a satisfying meal. Its texture was smooth, its flavor a mix of spiced meat that could be spread generously over whatever base you had on hand. For many, it was a reminder that in tough times, a little bit of meat, however processed, was enough to keep hunger at bay. Potted meat was a testament to the creativity born of necessity, turning a humble can into a symbol of endurance and the ability to find sustenance in even the most unlikely places. Frito pie. Frito pie is one of those dishes that might make you smile at the memory of its crunchy, cheesy goodness. In the 90s, it was a favorite among families looking for a quick, filling meal that didn't break the bank. The dish was built around a simple base, a bag of Fritos, which were then loaded with chili, cheese, and sometimes a dollop of sour cream. The combination of the crispy corn chips with the rich, savory chili created a texture and flavor that was both satisfying and utterly unique. It was a meal that could be whipped up in minutes and shared among siblings or friends gathered around the TV. Frito pie captured the essence of making do, using what was readily available to craft something that was more than the sum of its parts. It wasn't gourmet by any stretch, but it was a beloved treat that brought comfort and a bit of indulgence during lean times. Hot Pockets. Hot Pockets became synonymous with convenience in the 1990s. These microwavable treats were the epitome of a quick fix, a ready-made snack or meal that required minimal preparation. Whether it was for a rushed lunch before class or a late-night bite while watching your favorite show, Hot Pockets filled the role of a culinary lifesaver. Despite their reputation for being a bit on the processed side, they carried a nostalgic charm. Each Hot Pocket was a mystery until you bit in, a mix of melted cheese, processed meat, and a crispy outer shell that somehow made the whole experience feel indulgent. For many, they were the go-to meal when creativity in the kitchen was in short supply. Eating a Hot Pocket in the 90s was more than just grabbing a snack. It was a testament to the era's fast-paced life and the art of making something edible out of convenience and a dash of ingenuity. Bagel Bites. Bagel Bites were the ultimate mini pizza, and in the 90s they quickly became a favorite among kids and teens alike. These bite-sized treats featured a bagel base topped with a layer of tomato sauce, melted cheese, and various toppings, all heated to perfection in a microwave or oven. They weren't considered a gourmet snack by any stretch, but their convenience and fun size made them a hit at sleepovers and quick lunches. For families on a budget, Bagel Bites represented a clever fusion of two beloved foods, a bagel and pizza, in a form that was both affordable and delicious. Each bite carried the playful spirit of the 90s, where experimentation in the kitchen often led to surprisingly delightful outcomes. They were the perfect snack to share with friends, sparking conversations about school, life, and the quirky delights of growing up during a time when every meal was an adventure. Cracker Crust Pizza. Cracker Crust Pizza was a low-cost innovation that turned ordinary crackers into the base of a makeshift pizza. In kitchens where funds were tight, using crackers instead of dough saved money while still satisfying that craving for a slice of something cheesy and delicious. The process was simple. Layer a handful of crackers with a spread of tomato sauce, sprinkle on some shredded cheese, and if you were lucky, add a few pepperoni slices or bits of leftover vegetables. Baked until the cheese melted and the crackers softened just enough, this dish became an unexpected hit at family gatherings and impromptu snack times. It was a perfect example of how creativity could transform everyday items into a meal that felt both fun and fulfilling. Cracker Crust Pizza was more than just a culinary shortcut. It was a symbol of the 90s resourcefulness that turned basic ingredients into a shared moment of joy around the dinner table. Spaghetti Frittata. Spaghetti frittata took two seemingly incompatible foods and blended them into one surprisingly satisfying dish. In many 90s households, leftover spaghetti wasn't wasted. Instead, it was mixed with eggs, a bit of cheese, and sometimes a dash of hot sauce, then pan-fried into a thick, hearty frittata. This dish was a brilliant stroke of culinary genius, a way to reinvent yesterday's pasta into today's breakfast or dinner. The crispy edges and soft center made every bite a reminder that even leftovers could be reborn into something exciting and new. For many, spaghetti frittata was a comforting meal that transformed the mundane into the memorable. It was an ode to the idea that when resources were scarce, ingenuity was plentiful, and every meal was a chance to rewrite the rules of cooking. Minted lamb with jelly. At first glance, minted lamb with jelly might sound like a dish reserved for upscale dining, but in the 90s it was reinterpreted in kitchens where extravagance was a luxury. Using the cheapest cuts of lamb available, home cooks would season the meat with a blend of mint and other herbs, then serve it with a dollop of jelly, often grape or even an experimental mix of store-brand preserves, to mimic the tang and richness of a more refined sauce. This dish was a playful twist on what was traditionally an elegant meal. It was a culinary gamble that paid off with a burst of unexpected flavor and a hearty satisfaction. Every bite of minted lamb with jelly was a reminder that even when your ingredients were modest, you could still dare to dream of a meal that was both inventive and steeped in tradition. It was a dish that challenged expectations and celebrated the art of making luxury out of necessity. Taco salad. Taco salad was the ultimate expression of the 90s take on fusion cuisine, a mishmash of flavors that came together in a bowl to create something both crunchy and refreshing. The salad was built on a bed of iceberg lettuce, loaded with bits of seasoned ground beef, shredded cheese, tomatoes, and a generous scoop of crushed tortilla chips. A drizzle of salsa or a squirt of ranch dressing completed the ensemble. For many families, taco salad wasn't just a meal, it was a celebration of the idea that fast food could be transformed into something homemade and hearty. It offered a delightful crunch and a burst of flavors that made every bite feel like a small victory against the blandness of daily life. In the 1990s, taco salad was the perfect dish to serve at family gatherings or quick dinners, a reminder that even when money was tight, you could still enjoy a meal that was colorful, vibrant, and full of personality. Canned sardine fried rice. Canned sardine fried rice was a dish that embodied the art of turning the simplest pantry items into a flavorful meal. In a time when fresh fish was a luxury, canned sardines became a reliable stand-in. Stir-fried with leftover rice, a few chopped vegetables, and a splash of soy sauce, the sardines added a punch of umami and an unexpected richness to the dish. The result was a savory plate of fried rice that was both satisfying and budget-friendly. For many growing up in the 90s, every spoonful of this dish carried memories of family dinners where ingredients were scarce but creativity was abundant. It was a meal that celebrated the idea that even the most overlooked items in the pantry could be elevated with a bit of culinary ingenuity. Canned sardine fried rice was not just about feeding the body, it was about feeding the spirit of resourcefulness that defined an era. Ritz cracker meat pie. Ritz cracker meat pie was born out of a need to stretch every last ingredient. The dish involved using Ritz crackers as a crust substitute, layered with a filling made from ground meat, a splash of gravy, and whatever vegetables happened to be on hand. Baked until the crackers softened into a tender, savory crust, this meat pie was a perfect example of how necessity drove innovation in the kitchen. While it might not have looked like a traditional pie, every bite delivered a comforting mix of flavors that made you forget you were eating something assembled on a tight budget. It was a meal that proved that creativity could turn simple, readily available items into a dish that was both filling and heartwarming. In the 90s, the Ritz cracker meat pie was a culinary statement, a declaration that good food isn't about expensive ingredients, but about the love and ingenuity poured into each recipe. Toaster strudels. Toaster strudels were a sweet, convenient treat that brightened up many a rushed morning. These pocket-sized pastries with their flaky crusts and fruit fillings were a far cry from freshly baked desserts, yet they had a charm all their own. In the 1990s, toaster strudels were a popular choice for a quick breakfast or snack, warming up in the toaster and served with a simple packet of icing that you drizzled on top. They were the epitome of convenience and a nostalgic reminder that sometimes a little sweetness was all you needed to get through the day. For many, each toaster strudel was a small luxury, a moment of indulgence in an otherwise frugal routine that still left room for delight. Bulgur wheat pilaf. Bulgur wheat pilaf might sound exotic, but in many 1990s households, it was simply another creative way to use a cheap, filling grain. Bulgur wheat, with its nutty flavor and hearty texture, was combined with basic vegetables and a few spices to create a pilaf that was both nutritious and economical. This dish was particularly popular in families that valued a bit of variety in their meals, even when funds were limited. Each spoonful of the pilaf was a mix of textures and subtle flavors, a gentle reminder that sometimes the simplest ingredients, when treated with care and a bit of experimentation, could be transformed into something comforting and satisfying. It wasn't about lavish ingredients, it was about stretching what you had and making every meal a small act of culinary creativity. Fried bologna tacos. Fried bologna tacos were an unexpected twist on a classic fast food favorite, reinvented in the modest kitchens of the 90s. Instead of traditional taco meat, thin slices of bologna were fried until crispy, then crumbled and mixed with shredded lettuce, diced tomatoes, and a splash of hot sauce. Served in a soft tortilla or even a crisp taco shell, these tacos were a quick and inexpensive way to get a flavor-packed meal on the table. They were a hit with kids and adults alike, a playful reminder that sometimes the most unlikely ingredients could come together to form a dish that was both fun and filling. In every crunchy bite of a fried bologna taco, there was a story of culinary rebellion, of daring to mix what you had into something that defied expectations and filled the stomach just as well as any expensive dish. Potato patties. Potato patties were the unsung heroes of many a 90s breakfast table. Made from leftover mashed potatoes mixed with a bit of flour, egg, and whatever seasonings were at hand, these patties were formed into small, round cakes and pan-fried until golden brown. They were simple to make, incredibly satisfying, and a great way to transform leftovers into a new meal. For many families, the process of forming and frying these patties was a weekly ritual, a creative solution to avoid waste and to make every meal count. Every bite of a potato patty carried the memory of a busy morning, the sound of sizzling in the pan, and the knowledge that, with a little effort, you could turn something ordinary into something a bit special. Copper pennies. Copper pennies wasn't the name of a coin, but rather a nickname for a dish that symbolized the sheer thriftiness of the 90s kitchen. It referred to a meal that was so inexpensive to put together, often using scraps of meat, bits of vegetables, and a hearty broth, that it cost only a few copper pennies per serving. The dish was a stew or casserole that varied from household to household, each version a creative patchwork of available ingredients. What made copper pennies so memorable was the idea that every meal, no matter how frugal, was made with love and ingenuity. It was a daily reminder that resourcefulness could be a virtue, and that sometimes the most unassuming dishes carried the richest stories of survival and togetherness. Hoppin John. Hoppin John, a dish traditionally made with black-eyed peas, rice, and sometimes a bit of pork, was a beloved comfort food in the 90s. Its roots were steeped in tradition and folklore, with every spoonful believed to bring luck and prosperity, even when the budget was tight. In many households, Hoppin John was more than just a meal. It was a celebratory dish enjoyed on special occasions or simply as a hearty dinner during the week. The slow-cooked beans and rice created a filling, soulful dish that warmed you from the inside out. Each bite carried the echo of family gatherings, of long afternoons spent together around the table, and of a shared belief that with a little care and a bit of seasoning, even the humblest ingredients could yield something truly magical. Poor man's lasagna. Poor man's lasagna was the art of replicating a traditionally rich Italian dish using only the most basic, budget-friendly ingredients. Instead of layers of fresh pasta, families would use whatever was on sale, sometimes even slices of bread, to layer with a meager mix of tomato sauce, processed cheese, and leftover ground meat. The result was a lasagna that wasn't as refined as its counterpart in an Italian trattoria, but it was full of heart. Every forkful was a testament to the ingenuity of making something hearty and satisfying out of limited resources. It wasn't just a meal, it was an act of defiance against the notion that you needed expensive ingredients to enjoy a filling, comforting dish. Poor man's lasagna reminded everyone that creativity in the kitchen could turn even the humblest meal into a memorable feast. Powdered milk. Powdered milk might seem like a far cry from today's fresh dairy products, but in the 90s it was a pantry essential for many families. Whether used in cereal, to make a quick latte, or even in baking, powdered milk was a reliable source of nutrition when fresh milk wasn't always an option. Its reconstitution in a glass of water was a small, everyday miracle, a way to stretch a few dollars and still provide a bit of comfort in every meal. For those who grew up with it, the simple act of stirring in powdered milk was a reminder of resourcefulness and the quiet ingenuity that defines so many aspects of daily life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, dependable, and an essential part of the 1990s culinary landscape. Uncrustables. Uncrustables, those pre-made sealed peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, were a lifesaver for busy mornings and quick lunches. In an era when every minute and every dollar counted, these neat little parcels of nostalgia offered a taste of convenience that parents and kids alike could count on. They were a far cry from the elaborate, handcrafted sandwiches of yesteryear, but that's what made them so special. They were uniform, simple, and reliably filling. Uncrustables were more than just a quick fix. They were a symbol of the modern, fast-paced life of the 90s, where efficiency sometimes triumphed over culinary flair. Every bite was a little reminder that sometimes the simplest things in life were the ones that brought the most comfort. Corned beef and cabbage. Corned beef and cabbage rounded out our culinary journey as a dish that, while often associated with festive Irish meals, was reinterpreted in many 90s households as an everyday dinner on a budget. The corned beef, usually a tougher, less expensive cut, was simmered slowly with cabbage and potatoes until it transformed into a tender, hearty stew. This dish, with its robust flavors and filling nature, became a symbol of making the best out of modest ingredients. Every spoonful carried memories of family dinners where conversations flowed freely, and the struggles of the day melted away in the warmth of a shared meal. Corned beef and cabbage wasn't just food, it was a celebration of endurance, resourcefulness, and the enduring spirit of making something wonderful out of what you had.